which ones they'll be considering. The Senate will also take up legislation to address the doubling of interest rates on federal subsidized student loans, which took effect last week. Live now to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will be in order. The Chaplain, retired Admiral Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Lord God, our refuge and strength, continue to shower your blessings upon humanity. Turn sorrow into gladness, doubt into faith, and despair into hope. May our senators use all the circumstances of their lives to produce fruits of integrity. Lord, let them use disappointment as material for patience, danger as material for courage, praise as material for humility, and pain as material for perseverance. Guide their thinking as you bind them together in unity. For you, O God, are peace in our pressure, guidance in our confusion, and hope in our helplessness. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was very smooth. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
I now move to proceed to Calendar 124, S. 1238, Senator Reid of Rhode Island Student Loan Bill.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reid, moves to proceed to calendar number 124, S. 1238, a bill to amend the Higher Education Act of 1965 to extend the current reduced interest rate for undergraduate federal direct Stafford loans for 1 year to modify required distribution rules for pension plans and for other purposes.
Mr. President, at 5 p.m. today, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the nomination of Gregory Phillips of Wyoming to be United States Circuit Judge for the 10th Circuit. At 5:30 then this evening, there will be a roll call vote on confirmation of the Phillips nomination. Mr. President, I certainly welcome back the presiding officer, the President Pro Tem of the Senate. I hope that he and all my colleagues had a restful and productive week with our in-state work that we did during the 10 days that we were gone. It was a pleasure for me to spend time with my constituents in Nevada over the break and with my family. I had a wonderful time with my family. 4 of my children were there. Actually, 5 were there for a short period of time, all 5 of them. We had a wonderful 4th of July at one of my son's home. Everyone was there, neighbors. It was a great party. My grandson set off the fireworks. I'm not going to ask where he got them, but there were a lot of fireworks, a lot of fun, and it was a real celebration. But, Mr. President, everywhere I went, I saw the immense enthusiasm for this historic bipartisan immigration reform bill that we passed before the 4th of July. Often I heard how pleased Nevadans were to finally see bipartisanship here in the Senate, and that they saw bipartisanship blossom, and that's happened far too rarely in recent years. Americans of all political stripes are united behind the need for common sense reform. Even a large majority of Republicans believe immigration reform would be good for the economy and good for national security. And, Mr. President, I, as everyone knows here, I don't often tout the accomplishments of President Bush, the Bush #2. But I really appreciate what he did. The first public event at his new library in Texas was an event honoring into our country new immigrants for become citizens. And after the event, the President spoke about the need for passing the Senate bill. The President, when he was President, to his credit, he did everything he could to try to get it done, but Republicans would not follow the direction that he felt we should go. Senate Republicans did follow that. In the last vote we had 68 votes, and 14 of my Republican colleagues voted with us. And I appreciate that. I appreciate what President Bush did to focus attention on this again. I appreciate all the groups around the country, from the Chamber of Commerce to other conservative groups who are running paid advertisements on television saying they, the Republicans here in the House, should pass this legislation that we passed here. Mr. President, the only Republicans who aren't yet convinced are here in Washington, in the House of Representatives. Republicans around the country believe that it was important that we do this immigration reform legislation. As I indicated, 68 senators voted for this historic reform, but our responsibility didn't end with that vote. Now it's our duty to convince our colleagues in the House, yes, they should vote with us. Bipartisan immigration reform that includes a pathway to citizenship makes economic sense as well as political sense. Unfortunately, over the last few weeks, Speaker Boehner has taken a different route. That is one of ignoring the needs of the American people. Rather than moving to the center and advancing a bill that would appeal to moderates on both sides of the Capitol, Speaker Boehner has repeatedly tried to pass legislation with only Republican votes. The Hastert Rule, named after a recent Republican speaker, says that passing only bills that have the support of the majority is the only thing they're going to let happen. But it doesn't work, and it's bad for the country. Any major legislation passed by the House of Representatives with only Republican votes has no hope of advancing over here, Mr. President, or to be signed into law by the President. So I hope the Speaker has learned his lesson from recent high-profile failures of his short-sighted Hastert Rule. Post office, farm bill, online sales tax, immigration. Eventually, he'll be forced to take up the bill that we passed here, or the country will be left with no immigration reform at all, which is a bad, bad outcome. The Speaker should dispense with the posturing and delay and do the right thing, and he should do it now. He should take up the Senate farm bill that Chairman Stabenow worked so hard on. Should pass that bill. They should take it up over there and pass it. Farmers are waiting. All the nutrition groups around the country are waiting. He should do that right now. He should take up the Senate immigration bill. I say that for the second or third time here today. These measures, the farm bill, passed overwhelmingly on bipartisan votes in this chamber. And the passing of the farm bill would create jobs and reduce the debt by some $23 billion. And it will be important to note that there are reforms there, both the farm and food stamp programs, without balancing the budget on the backs of hungry Americans. In fact, it goes a long way to reducing our debt. Passing the immigration bill would help 11 million people who are already contributing to our economy and our society get right with the law. And it would boost our economy and make our country safer, all the while reducing the deficit by about $1 trillion over the next 2 decades. I remind the Speaker, there is no shame in passing bills moderates from both parties can support. America wants their elected officials to work together to fix the nation's problems. That's what we did in the Senate. I promise the formula will work in the House of Representatives as well. Speaker should try that. Sticking to the Hastert Rule has prevented the House from passing legislation to reform the ailing Postal Service. Postal reform passed over here on an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote. He refused to even take it up last Congress. Didn't even take it up. Sticking to the Hastert Rule prevented the House from passing a measure that would give brick-and-mortar stores parity with online competitors. We passed that on a bipartisan vote here, Mr. President. I mean, it's heartbreaking all over America. I see it in Nevada. To go by these strip malls, and you see these places that if they had the advantage of not having to pay sales tax, that's what happens online, they would be in business. They would go back into business if the the sales tax would have to be paid by the people who sell their goods over the internet. It's unfair. And why he doesn't take that up, I don't know. We already know that sticking to the Hastert rule prevented the House from passing a farm bill last month and last year. And this month, sticking to the Hastert rule prevented the House from passing immigration reform. Now, that would become law. Insisting on the Hastert rule also prevented Speaker Boehner from reaching across the aisle to find a sensible solution to rising student loan interest rates. Right now, what they've done over there is worse for students than doing nothing at all. The legislation passed by the House would balance the budget on the backs of struggling students, would attempt to balance it at least. The House legislation is worse for students than doing nothing at all, Mr. President. Under the House plan, as interest rates starts to rise, student loan rates will rise with them. Soon, loan rates will be more than double. I met with the White House, one of the President's assistants. I said, tell me what happens in 3 years. And he had to acknowledge the rates would be well over 6.8%. To find a responsible solution to the student loan issue and every other major issue facing this Congress, the Speaker should work with us and his Democratic colleagues in the House instead of against them. And he should remember that the only way to pass meaningful legislation in either chamber is to do so with votes from both reasonable Democrats and reasonable Republicans. I'm told the Speaker is going to come out with a statement today saying, we've passed our student loan legislation, now why can't the Senate pass it? Mr. President, I repeat, the Speaker's student loan legislation that passed the House is worse than doing nothing. The Hastert rule has been bad for this country, and Speaker Boehner should get away from it. I ask unanimous consent that senators we now go to a period of morning business. Senators be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each prior to the executive session at 5 p.m., with the exception that Senator Scott was giving his maiden speech today.
Without objection.
So will the chair announce the business of the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 5 o'clock p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. Speaker.
Senator from South Carolina.
I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized to speak in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is indeed a humbling honor to serve the great people of South Carolina in the United States Senate. I am so grateful for the support that I have received from South Carolinians. The success of the Palmetto State can be measured in many ways, but today let me share the success of our economic engine. From insourcing jobs from countries, jobs like Otis Elevators in Florence, South Carolina, or high-tech boom that's happening throughout South Carolina. Companies like BMW and the upstate continue to expand. Michelin in Anderson County expands. Continental Tires finds a home in Sumter, South Carolina. And more than 5,000 new jobs on the coast of South Carolina because of Boeing. And let's not forget Aiken, South Carolina, where Bridgestone has made a new home. South Carolina is and will continue to be a leading manufacturing engine for America. Mr. President, I stand before you today on the shoulders of two very amazing Americans. One has gone home to be with the Lord. The other is my hero, my mother, Frances Scott. Growing up in a single-parent household, my mother would have to work sometimes 16-hour days in order to keep me and my brother off of welfare. She wanted us to have a good example of someone who believed in hard work for us to follow. My mother used to tell me all the time that if you shoot for the moon and you miss, you'll be among the stars. But I didn't always listen to my mother. I'm not sure if you know how that works sometimes. And so by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was drifting. And have you ever noticed you don't really drift in the right direction? So as a freshman in high school, I failed out. I failed world geography. I think I'm the only United States senator to ever fail civics. I also failed Spanish and English. Mr. President, When you fail Spanish and English, they don't call you bilingual, sir. They do not. They call you biignorant because you can't speak in any language. And that's where I found myself, Mr. President. I will tell you that I found myself in a very strong and hard position. But good fortune strikes. I had two blessings. One was a mother who believed that sometimes love has to come at the end of a switch. And for those of you who are not aware of a switch, it is a motivational apparatus. It encouraged me a lot. And I will tell you that along with my mentor, John Moniz, who came along at the right time as a sophomore, I found my way back on the path. And John Moniz, the Chick-fil-A operator who made such a major impact in my life over the last 3 decades. John came along as I was a sophomore in high school, and he taught me some very, very valuable lessons. A couple of those lessons that John started teaching me very early on was about being a business owner. You see, John believed that you could literally think your way out of poverty. You didn't have to be an entertainer or an athlete, but you could become an entrepreneur. And so John started teaching me some of the lessons of being a business owner. He said, having a job, this is a good thing, but creating jobs is even better. John would teach me later that earning an income, you have done well. But if you can learn to create a profit, you've done fantastic. He taught me some other lessons about individual responsibility. John once told me that if you don't like where you are, look in the mirror. Blame yourself. You see, John was trying to teach me some very valuable lessons about individual responsibility. I learned very quickly from John that if you were a part of the problem, you were also part of the promise. That in fact, if you saw yourself as a part of your obstacle, you may have just found the key ingredient to your opportunities. It took a little time before the lessons of my mentor and the strong discipline of my mother started to germinate in my soil, but it finally did. And after 4 years of having John as my mentor, something very tragic happened. At the young age of 38, John suddenly passed away. And I'll remember the day before his funeral, like it was yesterday. I sat down and I wrote out my mission statement: to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people with a message of hope and opportunity. Hope being my faith in Christ Jesus, and opportunity being the lessons of financial literacy and financial independence that I learned from my mentor, John Moniz. Well, I decided to follow in the footsteps of my mentor, John. I started my own business, and I learned very quickly the challenges of signing the front of the paycheck when you could not sign the back for yourself. And over the last 2 decades, as a business owner and as an elected official, whether it was as a member of county council, or as a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives, or being elected to the United States Congress, I have used as my foundation the lessons that I've learned from my mentor and my mother. During my time here in the Senate, I will focus on a few key issues, including education, economic empowerment, and controlling our spending addiction. As a small business owner over the last 15 years, I can tell you firsthand that our tax code is broken. With the highest corporate tax rate in all the world and the taxing of small and family-owned businesses at an alarming rate, we will continue to produce a slow-growth economy. And the regulatory nightmare facing our small business owners today is only worsened by the Unaffordable Care Act, as my good friend Congressman Kucinich said yesterday. Further, with over 70,000 pages of new regulations in the last 5 years, the compliance cost for small businesses is staggering. We do not simply need a delay in the employer mandate, we need a repeal of the employer mandate. On education, I will tell you as a poor kid, by the time I was in the 4th grade, I had already attended 4 schools. It is very difficult for us to fund the right school with sometimes the transient nature of poverty. You have to move a lot. I believe that the system and the people closest to the child are in the best position to provide the highest quality of education for that child. So there's no way a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. can better educate a child in Lexington County than that child's parents and the teachers who are so involved in that education. We need a national debate on education. Parents need more choices so that their kids will have a chance. So let's debate it. Let's debate charter schools. Mr. President. Let's debate public school choice, private school choice, tax credits, homeschoolers. Whatever it takes to improve our education system should be on the table for discussion. Let me close with this. If we create a competitive tax code and a fair, sensible regulatory environment, as well as a world-class education system, we will create the best economy known to man, just like we have in times past. You see, Mr. President, the best and the brightest days are still ahead for America. Our strongest moments, our strongest stands are still in our future. I believe in the greatness of America because I've experienced the goodness of her people. In America, an ordinary guy like me can be blessed with an extraordinary opportunity like this. Thank you, and God bless America.
President.
The Republican leader.
Mr. President, I just wanted to congratulate our good friend from South Carolina on his maiden speech and the opportunity to obviously learn more about his inspirational early life and the bilingual nature of your beginnings and the way you interpreted those lessons, both from your mother and from your mentor, into the extraordinary success you've had both in the private sector and the public sector. And I just would like to say on behalf of my colleagues, it's an honor to serve with you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to join the Republican leader in expressing my appreciation for Senator Scott. Today, it's a day not just for his maiden speech, but we have new pages on the Senate floor. It is their first time, and I see the bright eyes of these young people looking up to the senator as he gives his maiden speech. Because he talks about the next generation. And I was thinking a bit, because I saw an editorial that the senator had written, published Sunday a week ago, called IRS Targeting Scandal Shows Need for Reform. So I was happy to hear the senator talk about some of the things that are happening there, because he talks about responsibility, accountability, the kind of things we heard in this maiden speech today. He writes in a concise way, also a courageous way. So I want to join the Republican leader in welcoming the new senator in his comments and look forward to working with him for many, many years to come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I want to join my colleagues in congratulating our recently arrived colleague from South Carolina on his maiden speech. It strikes me that we all want the same thing, pretty much. We want an opportunity. We want to make sure that our kids get the best quality of education so they can compete in a global economy. But to be honest about it, we do have different approaches on how to achieve those goals, it strikes me, across the aisle. Those who believe that government should play a bigger, more expansive role, they have their own ideas and approach. Those of us who believe in limited government and that is most consistent with individual freedom and the opportunity to strive, work hard, and succeed, the notion of earned success. We have a different approach, and I know the senator from South Carolina agrees with that. I also believe the senator from South Carolina has been a tremendous addition because of his background and his upbringing. Some people might say we don't need more lawyers in the Senate, and he certainly is not one of those. But he is somebody who's succeeded in the private sector, been marvelously successful now both in the House and here in the Senate, and it's great to have him as part of the Senate and contributing his unique perspective and being able to articulate, as he does so well, how small government, limited government principles apply to that concept of earned success that all of us want, not only for ourselves but for our families as well.
Thanks, sir.
President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Mr. President, I want to join my colleagues in complimenting the senator from South Carolina. Turn around this way so I can see him. Number one, because of his work ethic, I have the privilege of being ranking member, Republican member of the committee that has maybe the broadest jurisdiction and the most diversity of any of our committees: Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And I've watched Senator Scott in the first several months as a senator, and how hard he works, how well prepared he is. He's spoken out on labor issues. He made a major contribution to the debate we had on whether we need a national school board or local control on elementary and secondary education. When other senators are doing other things, he's right there at the committee hearing. So he's made a quiet, effective, principled, studious contribution to the United States Senate, in my experience, these first few months, and I'm delighted to have him here. He's done so well that I've invited him to come to Tennessee on Friday and speak to one of the largest gatherings we have annually in the state, and he's agreed to come, and we're grateful for that. And finally, I'd compliment him on one other thing. Sometimes I like to tell stories about the person for whom I came to the Senate to work for, Senator Howard Baker. And when he first came, I would say to the senator from South Carolina, when Senator Baker came to the Senate in 1967, the Republican leader was his father-in-law, Everett Dirksen. And Senator Baker made his maiden speech, probably from a back row, about like you're making yours. And his father-in-law was sitting right there where Senator McConnell sits, listening to the whole thing. And it went on, and it went on, and it went on, and it went on for nearly about an hour. And after it was over, Senator Dirksen came over to Senator Baker, and Senator Baker said to his father-in-law, "Well, how'd I do, Senator Dirksen?" And the Republican leader said to the new senator, he said, "Maybe, Howard, you should occasionally try to enjoy the luxury of an unexpressed thought." So I congratulate Senator Scott for a succinct maiden address. He's not only effective and studious and diligent, he knows how to speak his words clearly and succinctly, and it's wonderful to see him here.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President, I suggest the absence for quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
And the Senate in after a week-long 4th of July break, making some general speeches until 5 o'clock Eastern Time today. At that point, they're going to turn to the nomination of a Wyoming Attorney General to serve on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And over in the House, they've gavelled in and out already today. They'll be working this week on spending bills for energy and water projects for fiscal year 2014. And off the floor on the House, working on a strategy to bring immigration legislation to the floor. And later on today, with Congress back, we're going to have live coverage off the floor of a House hearing looking at the impact of the 2010 health care law on Medicaid. Beginning January 1st, the program will be expanded to include an additional 7 million people. You can watch coverage of that House hearing 4 p.m. Eastern Time on our companion network, C-SPAN 3, and then live at 6:30 Eastern on C-SPAN 3. Former CIA Director James Woolsey will be talking about the U.S. dependence on oil and how that affects national security. Earlier today, President Obama announced a new management agenda for the federal government. He appointed White House Budget Director Sylvia Matthews Burwell to lead the effort, and he called on Congress to grant him new authority to redesign the government. And while the Senate's in a quorum call, we'll take a look at the announcement that he made from the state dining room in the White House.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Everybody, please have a seat. Well, thank you so much. Back in 2007, when I was first running for this office, I had the opportunity to visit Google headquarters in Mountain View in Silicon Valley to discuss ways we could use technology to allow more citizens to participate in their democracy and bring a government built largely in the 20th century into the 21st century. After all, we had already set out to build a new type of campaign, one that used technology to bring people together, and then trusted them with that technology to organize on their own. And the idea was simple. Instead of bringing more people to the campaign, we wanted to bring the campaign to more people and let them determine its course and its nature. If you wanted to make phone calls or knock on doors, you didn't have to come into a field office first. You could just get the information you needed right on your phone and go out there and do it. If you want to get your friends involved, then we had the tools to help you connect. And I very much felt that some of the things that we were doing to help us get elected could also be used once we were elected. You know, if you wanted to share your story, we could help you get your story out. And throughout this process, we created one of the most inclusive and one of the most successful campaigns in American history. Now, once we got to Washington, instead of an operation humming with the latest technology, I had to fight really hard just to keep my BlackBerry. And as anyone knows, dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly. So over the past 4.5 years, we've worked diligently to change that. Just like we did on that campaign, we started by recruiting some of the smartest people from the private sector to work side by side with some of the smartest people in the public sector to help get it done. So that day that I visited Google, I promised to appoint the nation's first CTO, Chief Technology Officer. And soon after I took office, I did. Today, our Chief Technology Officer, Todd Park, and our Chief Information Officer, Steve Van Rokel, are working with their teams to innovate and apply the best technology to help solve some of our biggest challenges, from creating jobs to reducing healthcare costs to keeping our nation secure. We are the first to confess that progress has not always come quick, and major challenges still remain. But we've made huge swaths of your government more efficient and more transparent and more accountable than ever before. And we've done it by focusing on 3 areas. First, we found ways to deliver the services that citizens expect in smarter, faster, and better ways. So, for example, until recently, when a natural disaster struck, teams from FEMA had to rely exclusively on in-person inspections to figure out which families needed help. Now they analyze satellite and aerial imagery and get housing assistance to areas that need it most more quickly. After Hurricane Sandy, most folks were able to sign up for assistance using FEMA's mobile and web apps, updating and checking the status of their applications. And FEMA agents went door to door in some areas with iPads, helping residents who had lost power and internet access sign up for disaster relief without leaving their homes. So making sure that we're delivering services better, faster, more efficient. Second, we've identified new ways to reduce waste and save taxpayers' money. So, for example, just by working to get rid of overlapping IT systems, we've identified more than $2.5 billion in savings across the federal government, and that's just the beginning. I've proposed and signed into law the elimination of dozens of federal programs and cut even more that were either duplicative, not working, or no longer needed, saving billions of dollars a year. And the basic principle is simple. Taxpayers deserve the biggest bang for their buck. especially at a time when budgets are tight and we've got to do a lot more with less. And now anyone can visit whitehouse.gov to see your taxpayer receipt. There's a literal receipt that tells you just how and where your tax dollars are being spent. Finally, for the first time in history, we've opened up huge amounts of government data to the American people and put it on the internet for free. At data.gov, you can search through and download more than 75,000 data sets. Data on everything from what different hospitals charge for different procedures, to credit card complaints, to weather and climate measurements. And what's happening is entrepreneurs and business owners are now using that data, the people's data, to create jobs and solve problems that government can't solve by itself or can't do as efficiently. So there's a company called OPower, for example, that's used open government data on general energy trends and weather to help families save more than $300 million on their energy bills. There's another company called iTriage, founded by 2 emergency room doctors, that is using freely downloadable data about health care providers from the Department of Health and Human Services to help more than 9 million people find the closest doctors and hospitals that meet their needs. And the list goes on. And these companies have now hired hundreds of people, and they're still hiring. And millions of people have already used these applications that were created as a consequence of releasing this data. So we've made some good progress on all fronts, but now we need to do more. So today, I met with all my cabinet, including a number of new cabinet members, some of whom have extraordinary private sector experience, and I directed the cabinet to develop an aggressive management agenda for my second term that delivers a smarter, more innovative, and more accountable government for its citizens. And we're going to continue to adopt good ideas from the private sector. I've asked Sylvia Matthews-Burwell, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, to lead this effort. And Sylvia was part of a team at OMB that presided over 3 years of budget surpluses in the 1990s. After philanthropic work at the Gates Foundation and the Walmart Foundation, she's come back to help us move this effort forward. She's not the only one. We've also welcomed a new class of Presidential Innovation Fellows, and I'd love for the press to meet some of these folks because they're extraordinary. These are Americans with vast private sector technology expertise who have volunteered to come serve their country in the private sector. So, for example, Scott Wu helped found a company that helps recent graduates turn their good ideas into good businesses. And Claire Holroyd used to manage product design for everything from mobile phones to video games. Garen Givens founded an innovative shopping site that adapts to your tastes as you browse. And so they and 40 other fellows are taking this private sector expertise and bringing it into the government, making it smarter, making it more user-friendly. Today, for example, many online shopping websites help fill in some of your information so you don't have to enter it every time you log in. As a consequence, we're working on a project called My USA that will save you time by doing the same thing with government forms. And if you're applying for federal benefits, we think you should be able to track the status of your application in real time, just like you can follow location of a package all the way to your doorstep. These are things that are in the pipeline right now. Currently, when our government asks for bids on a project, it's usually written in complicated language with complicated requirements that most people don't understand. We're working to make things simpler so it's easier for more small businesses across the country to bid on projects. And we'll help businesses create more jobs doing work that needs to be done, and by opening up more competition to government contracts, we'll save taxpayers money in the process. We recently relaunched an upgraded, easier healthcare.gov. Beginning October 1st, Americans will be able to log on and comparison shop an array of private health insurance plans side by side, just like you go online and compare the best deal on cars or the best deal on computers. Because you'll finally be part of a new pool with millions of other Americans, insurers will actually want to compete for your business. And we've worked really hard to make these marketplaces user-friendly. So, for example, when the prototype of an application to join the marketplace came in at 21 pages, we rejected it. We said, let's do better. It's now 3 pages long. And by the way, that's a lot shorter than the application you have to fill out for private insurance currently. Last year, I also asked Congress for the authority to reorganize and consolidate the federal bureaucracy. We're doing a lot of this work administratively, but unfortunately, there are still a bunch of rules, a lot of legislation that has poorly designed some of our agencies and forces folks to engage in bureaucratic hoop jumping instead of just going ahead and focusing on mission and delivering good service to our citizens. So what we've asked is, let's clean this up. Let's consolidate it. Almost every president, from Herbert Hoover to Ronald Reagan, had this authority to redesign the federal government, the executive branch, to deliver services better. Just like every business owner seeking to make sure that his or her company keep pace with the times. Currently, we do not have that capacity. And so I'm going to keep on doing what we can administratively, but we sure could use Congress's help, particularly at a time when Congress is saying they want more efficient government. They give a lot of lip service to it. And we're operating under severe fiscal constraints. It makes sense for us to be able to redesign government so that it can deliver on the functions that American people are looking for. We should all want a government that's smarter, quicker, and more responsive to the needs of the American people. Now, the good news is America's full of talented, dedicated public servants who are working really hard every day to uphold the public trust. And those of us who believe that government has a responsibility to guarantee some level of basic security and to make sure everybody gets a fair shot at success, from the entrepreneur who wants to start a business to the workers who will work in that business, we also have a responsibility to make sure that government works. And that's why I'm glad that we've got people like Scott and Claire and Garen and so many other talented, idealistic men and women who've signed up to help us tackle these challenges. That's why we're so proud that Sylvia is going to be heading this up. And I'm going to be asking more people around the country, more inventors and entrepreneurs and visionaries, to sign up to serve. We've got to have the brightest minds to help solve our biggest challenges. And it's a reminder that in this democracy, we, the people, recognize that this government belongs to us, and it's up to each of us and every one of us to make it work better. We can't just stand on the sidelines. We can't take comfort in just being cynical. We all have a stake in government success because the government is us, and we're doing things right. When we're tracking weather more effectively, that saves lives for folks who are in the path of a tornado. When we're delivering effectively data on improved health care choices, that's going to save lives and reduce costs. And we've got the potential to do so much better than we're doing right now, but we're going to need the help of the private sector, the non-for-profits. Most of all, we want to make sure that we're empowering some of the folks who are sitting here today to make sure that they can deliver on the kind of 21st century government that the American people want. So thank you very much, everybody. Keep up the good work.
Also from the White House today during the daily briefing, the spokesperson Jim Carney said the White House says cutting off aid immediately to Egypt would not be in the best interest of the United States. Jay Carney saying the U.S. is still reviewing whether the Egyptian military's ouster of President Mohamed Morsi should be labeled a coup. And he said that the U.S. is not supporting any side in the conflict, but wants a democratic process in Egypt. And while the Senate is in a quorum call right now, we're going to take a look at some of this morning's Washington Journal and the topic, the role that religion plays in American politics and culture today. And again, this is from this morning's Washington Journal. Again, this is the first day the Senate's back after a week-long recess for the 4th of July break, making some general speeches earlier until 5 o'clock Eastern Time today, at which point they're going to turn to the nomination of a Wyoming Attorney General to serve on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. Majority Leader Harry Reid was first on the floor earlier today. He talked about student loan interest rates, which reverted back to their original rates at the beginning of the month. And in a statement, House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi said, quote, America's students and middle class face another Republican-manufactured crisis, yet House Republicans are more interested in finding someone to blame than in seeking a solution. And she went on to say that Democrats are ready and eager to resolve the crisis. Again, that statement from House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi on student loan interest rates, which we heard a little bit about today earlier on the Senate floor. And now we're going to turn to the role of religion played in American politics and culture today, while the Senate is in a quorum call waiting for senators to take the floor.
And Dr. Russell Moore became president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission on June 1st and has had a busy first few weeks in that job. Dr. Moore, thanks for taking some time with us this morning. For those that don't know, explain what your role is with the Southern Baptist Convention.
Well, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission really serves two purposes. One is to speak to our churches about moral and ethical concerns, about what it means to live as a follower of Jesus Christ, and then to speak for our churches in the larger cultural and political arena about those things that we believe are important to us.
Well, one issue that you've spent a lot of time speaking about and working on in your new role is the Supreme Court's recent ruling on same-sex marriages. Talk about the Southern Baptist Convention's reaction to the results of these cases.
Well, I don't think many of us were surprised by the actual rulings. I think many of us were surprised, though, by the language in Justice Kennedy's majority opinion on the DOMA case, which essentially said that there's no reason to define marriage as the union between a man and a woman exclusively, except for hostility and animus toward persons, which we don't believe is the case. We believe that there are good reasons for the government to see marriage as being distinctively that union of a man and a woman. So that was surprising and disappointing.
Where were you when that ruling came down?
I was here in Washington and waiting by the television sets to see what the court would do, as I think many people were on all sides of the equation.
But you said not surprised by the rulings itself, but more the language of the ruling.
Yes, I was surprised by the reasoning behind it, using language of equal protection and so forth. I think Justice Scalia is right that it will be very difficult for the court now to allow states to state by state define marriage in the way that they currently do. I think the language there is setting the court up for a Roe versus Wade type of decision in the future.
Do you think this ruling says something about the role of social conservatives in America today?
Well, I think it says something to social conservatives. I think for a long time, social conservatives in America had a kind of silent majority view of ourselves, and conservative evangelicals and conservative Roman Catholics had a moral majority view of ourselves, as though we somehow represent the mainstream of American culture. Most people really agree with us, except for some elites somewhere. That really isn't the case. I think we need to start seeing the fact that we're very similar to the way the Christian church was at the very beginning of its existence, a minority of people who are speaking to the larger culture in ways that are going to sometimes seem freakish to that larger culture. I don't think that's anything that should panic us or cause us to become outraged or despondent. I think it's a realistic view of who we are.
And respond to this headline in the USA Today after that ruling came out, this headline from June 26, religious leaders divided on gay marriage decision. One person it quotes in that story is the Reverend J. Bennett Guess of the United Church of Christ, the largest Protestant denomination to come out in favor of gay marriage. He praised the decision as victories for both same-sex and opposite-sex marriages. Quote, the Supreme Court has underscored the central point that marriage is ultimately about the commitment between two people who love one another, Guess said. It is a great step toward full freedom and recognition for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people.
Well, there's always been a mainline Protestant group within American Christianity that has adapted itself to the ambient culture when it comes to issues of Christian sexuality and seeks to revise a Christian sexual ethic to meet that. I think you'll see that those who hold most closely to the orthodox teachings of the Christian church, whether Protestant, Roman Catholic, or Eastern Orthodox, are standing right where the church has always stood for 2,000 years on these issues.
Another headline I want to point you to, this is an opinion piece from last week's Delmarva Now News out on Maryland's Eastern Shore. The editorial says, gay marriage issue is about rights, not religion. Your response to that? Is it about rights versus religion?
Well, I think the issue isn't really religion. The issue is, why does the state care about this at all? Why should the state care about what a relationship is or is not? I think when it comes to marriage, the reason that the state has to be involved is because the union of a man and a woman is different than other relationships. Male-female sexuality brings about possible consequences of children, and the state has to be involved in that, unless we're going to have some sort of Lord of the Flies society where the state has no interest at all in whose children belong to whom. That's a different sort of recognition. And so what we're saying is not that the state ought to somehow penalize or stigmatize people. We're just saying that children have a right to a mother and a father, and there's something distinctive about that sort of family structure that the state has an interest in.
We're talking with Dr. Russell Moore. He's with the Southern Baptist Convention. He's president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. If you want to call in, have a question, comment for him, phone lines are open. Democrats can call at 202-585-3880. Republicans, 202-585-3881. Independents, 202-585-3882. And if you're outside the U.S., it's 202-585-3883. We mentioned you were appointed to this post on June 1st. What did you do before that?
I was dean of the School of Theology at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, so I was working to train pastors and missionaries.
And you worked as a preaching pastor yourself, correct?
I have, yes.
Where was that?
Highview Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky, for 4.5 years. Great joy in my life.
And where are you from originally?
Biloxi, Mississippi, right over the state line from New Orleans.
And you worked for a Mississippi congressman, correct?
Yes, Gene Taylor, Democrat from Mississippi, a great man.
Well, back to the DOMA case. Talk about how the DOMA ruling is going to impact how religious nonprofit groups do their work in terms of receiving money from the government and that sort of thing.
Well, it's hard to see. That's one of the things that we're very concerned about is potential religious liberty concerns that may come out of this larger movement, not this particular case itself, but the larger.
I ask unanimous consent that the order for the quorum call be rescinded.
Without objection, Senator from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my colleagues and I are often at odds when trying to solve some of our nation's most pressing and difficult problems. However, one thing that we can all agree on is that the men and women who wear our nation's uniforms are selfless heroes who embody the American spirit of courage and patriotism. We must continue to honor the sacrifice and service of our troops who have fought to protect and defend our freedoms. Today, I'm here to pay my respects to Army Specialist Robert A. Pierce, and an Arkansas soldier who gave his life while in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Specialist Pierce graduated from Mansfield High School. He spent his free time perfecting his steak cooking abilities at the Bulldog Diner in Greenwood, Arkansas.
A former co-worker described these as the best steaks ever. Specialist Pierce's friends say the money he earned at his part-time job went to fixing his truck. His love of auto mechanics led him to do most of the work himself. Specialist Pierce's family said he joined the military in 2011 to make a difference. He served in South Korea before his assignment at Fort Campbell. He was a member of A Company, 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Specialist Robert Pierce was only 20 when he gave his life for his country last month while on patrol in Afghanistan. Mr. President, Specialist Pierce is a true American hero who made the ultimate sacrifice. I ask my colleagues to keep his wife Christian and the rest of his family and friends in their thoughts and prayers. On behalf of a grateful nation, I humbly offer my sincerest gratitude for his patriotism and selfless sacrifice. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.